and seconded by Virginia Warriner, that we accept those apologies. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Anyone against? Kia ora. So moving to the next item is the approval from the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee for electronic attendance. A procedural matter, and again, can I have someone move in that direction?
Aye.
Moved by Cherie Povey, have a seconder.
I'm happy to second it.
It wasn't moved by me.
Okay, somebody.
It was me, Tame.
Okay, moved by
Kia ora.
Georgina Connolly and
Kia ora.
seconded by Jane Sherrard, that we adopt the electronic attendance for the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee of the 15th of November 2021. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? That matter is carried. Okay, moving to the declaration of interest, a standard statement that we have adopted is to call for any declarations and to remind the committee to declare any conflicts as they arise, and a reminder to complete the declaration of interest form and return to Sandra Harris. Moving to confirmation of minutes, agenda item 4.1 for the meeting held the 20th of September 2021. I call for a motion to confirm the minutes of the Joint Committee dated 20th September 2021, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to confirm.
Was that Virginia?
It was Joss, Tame.
Oh, sorry. Kia ora, Josh, your voice looked like Virginia.
I'll second Tommy, Malcolm.
Kia ora, Malcolm. Moved by Jocelyn Yeoman, seconded by Malcolm Welsh, that we confirm the KMR JC minutes of 20th of September 2021. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Any abstentions? Any? Where are we? Do we have any discussions? Any further discussion? There's none. We'll move to agenda item 5.1 and the procurement of the Kaipara Moana Remediation Freshwater Management Tool. We have a lineup of Tom Stevens, Principal Integrated Catchment Healthy Waters, Auckland Council, Nick Conlon, Taiao Natural Resource Management, and of course John Hutton, the Strategic Business Manager of Kaipara Maurikura. First, to ask someone to move the report be received, and then we'll pass it over to John, Nick and Tom to take us through the document. We can have someone move the receipt. Okay, kia ora, Amy McDonald, about seconder.
Kia ora,
Seconded
Tame.
Jocelyn Yeoman. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those
Aye.
against? Any abstentions? That's carried, and we have received your report. John, Nick and Tom will hand it over to you three. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much, Chair. I should also introduce Nick Brown, who's here helping us talk to this paper today. Nick, long and short of it, he's Tom's boss. So welcome on board, and thanks for joining us, Nick, at short notice. Really appreciate it. I'd also just like to acknowledge Georgina Connolly for joining the Joint Committee. Tēnā koe. It's really lovely to have you there, Georgina. Good to see you. And of course, our new Kaipara Maurikura staff up there in Whakarai. Down here in Auckland, we're getting really good at growing hair and rocking the 1970s look. So yeah, and or big beards, as the case may be. but very much look forward to seeing you all in the flesh sometime in the not too distant future. Look, putting that aside, this paper is a paper that's seeking some decisions from the Joint Committee about the freshwater management tool adaptation for the Kaipara Moana remediation program. You'll recall from workshops and other discussions that this freshwater management tool is one of 3 digital tools that are being developed to support the KMR. The first is a grants management tool, which is this Mardi grants platform. The second is a kind of farm planning tool, which is contracting with Media Suite. And then this is the third piece to the assemblage, or the freshwater management tool, which is about providing catchment context and catchment priorities for the KMR. Now, the decisions that we're seeking in this paper, there are three of them. The first really is to take an approach that would have the Chief Executive of the Northland Regional Council being delegated to finalising commercial contracts with preferred suppliers, and those preferred suppliers are Morpham Environmental Limited and Paradigm Environmental Limited, and I'll talk about that soon. Second, decisions around a budget cap for the contract and for the digital build of 1.2 million. Well, I'll talk about that soon. And the third resolution is asking the Poutātaki to develop a long-term agreement with Auckland Council's Healthy Waters for the hosting, operation and maintenance costs associated with the tool. But look, if I can take a little bit of time just to summarise the key parts of the paper here for you, it is obviously set out in full in the paper. We're asking for a preferred supplier approach here as an exception to what is the normal procurement policy for projects of this type of scale. In fact, under the procurement policy, anything over $75,000 needs to go to a public tender. Under over $250,000, it needs to go to a public tender, as well as have a tender committee form and come to the Joint Committee for a decision. Here, we think there's a very strong argument for and an argument that would tend to cost and value for money to take a preferred supplier approach. And the paper sets the reasons out for this. In essence, it's because this adaptation of the freshwater management tool for the KMR is taking an existing build that Auckland Council has been undertaking for the last 4 years. I should note that build has a budget expenditure to date of around 5 million. What we'd be doing is picking up that existing work, extending the scope of the existing freshwater management tool into the area of the Kaipara catchment that is outside the Auckland Council area. In other words, into the Northland Regional Council area that's, as you're aware, 75% of the catchment. So it's taking an existing platform and then gathering the data and doing all of the work needed to actually be able to model the entire catchment as a whole. So it's picking up on important existing work and capitalising on that. I should comment that Auckland Council, when contracting with Paradigm and Morpham, ran a competitive tendering process. This was 4 years ago, so that process has been undertaken. In that time, though, Paradigm and Morpham have demonstrated they're reliable, they have delivered, they are cost effective. More recently, they're being engaged by another council in New Zealand to do a similar type of build. So we would stand by them as reliable providers here. There's also an important time-saving aspect. If we went to market and sought another provider or other providers, there would be a considerable period we expect where they'd need to get up to speed, and would effectively have quite a duplication of effort being required. Another factor is that the freshwater management tool remains under development by Auckland Council. It's a product that's got various stages that are going through. With the current stage has been completed and reviewed, but the other stages are yet to come. So it's important, and Auckland Council has contractual commitments to Paradigm and Morpham to carry on the build. So we're also confident that we can get a cost for value negotiation with Paradigm and Morpham. And the paper sets out some of the procurement sort of steps that would be undertaken here. So requirements for the build would be defined, or have been defined, in fact. We would seek a development quote and methodology from them. There'd be a negotiations to contract, a technical reference group involving representatives from the councils, and we're also seeking a Kaipara representative on that, would be there in the background to check things. And then ultimately the contract would need to be signed off by the Northland Regional Council CE, Malcolm Nicholson. So these steps in this process, we think, will provide a robust methodology of arriving at a fair cost. The other aspect that we're seeking here is we're asking the Joint Committee to place a cap on the budget for the build of 1.2 million. I should say this is necessary because right now the Joint Committee has approved budget for the project, but this would add, and that's a project as a whole, including the kind of staff time that needs to go on in the background. But that budget doesn't make any internal distinctions, and we're thinking it'd be useful to have a cap. It's not a target, I should say, it is a cap, but that would be useful for the negotiations. In terms of the last resolution, which is looking, asks that the Poutātaki develop a long-term agreement with Auckland Council for the hosting and things, the tool in the future. That is a future question, and we don't have all of the answers there at all. This is really seeking direction from the Joint Committee that conversation takes place, because we're conscious that going forward, it's going to be important to keep that relationship in place. Point being that although this build will create a KMR, Kaipara Moana Remediation specific version of the freshwater management tool, and it will be prioritised and adjusted for our needs. For example, a much greater focus on sediment than, say, on zinc, things that might happen in the big cities. So it'll have a focus for the Kaipara, but nevertheless, it will be linked in with what Auckland Council is doing. And importantly, there are cost implications. So if, for example, Auckland Council is doing work and running the model that they will have, that includes the South Kaipara and the South Kaipara catchment, it makes a lot of sense to do those model runs at the same time and not to duplicate costs. And if this build happens effectively, we should be able to run things, run certain scenarios and things through the tool simultaneously with what Auckland Council is doing, as well as separately at times. But look, that's a fair bit of talking from me. I won't ask my colleagues to hop in and say anything else. I think, Mr. Chair, be very happy just to move straight to questions from the Joint Committee. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora, John. And just before passing over for any questions, to see a number of hands up. Tēnā koe, Daniel Newman. Good to see you, and also to learn of the supreme effort going on to get people closer to that magic 90% and above around vaccinations. And I've got some hands up here, and looking at my screen, starting with Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 4 or 5 questions. First one, because I thought maybe it could go into recommendations if the answer was positive, and that was I understand there might be a Maori name being sought for the management tool. Had that been identified yet? That's the first question. Do you want me to give all the questions now, Mr. Chair, so
Yep.
appropriate people can answer? Okay, that's the first question. The second one was the way I've read the paper, the 1.2 million incorporates the full cost, I think it says. So I assume that it includes any cost to date. So just confirmation on that. There's about 267,000 that's the contribution from the councils, was basically contribution in kind. I'd just like clarification about on how much each council was contributing towards that 267,000, just to get a feel for the proportions. And the final question was, with the contingency of 70,000 mentioned in the paper, if that needed to be spent, does that come back in front of the committee to decide, or is that being delegated to the chief executive to also spend that money if required? That's Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I don't know if we have a Māori name yet, but we certainly will want one. I think Tame, you had made a suggestion, but this was something we wanted to canvass with the Kaipara members, and we'd anticipate that would happen sooner rather than later. But for use and branding purposes, calling this freshwater management tool Kaipara Moana Remediation Dash or whatever seems pretty clunky to us, and we really do want something that captures this better. So we don't have that there as part of the resolution at this stage, but just an indication we're keen to have that happen. Your question on the full cost on the 1.2 million, that's the full cost that would be contracted externally to the suppliers. We do, when we're budgeting for these things, we do try to cost in the cost of running the build, of the background work that needs to happen from staff. So there's quite an engagement, or will be, between the Kaipara Matakura staff, the Auckland Council staff, who are effectively working with the Kaipara Matakura on the build. So that's where the 267,000 of council in-kind contributions sits. With that, you asked about the proportions. The lion's share of that would be with Auckland Council. They are the ones with the technical expertise that would be leading out on this. But there's an important linkage here with Northern Regional Council and, of course, the Kaipara Matakura staff. So, in fact, the staff costs within the Matakura are budgeted separately. So I can't give you an exact proportion on that, but I'd hazard a guess it's something like 70-30 or 80-20 in terms of an apportionment there. If I can just pause at that point and ask Tom whether that's aligning with his understanding.
Yeah, thanks, John. Kia ora, everyone. Yes, definitely. Name for the tool, entirely yours. I'd thoroughly encourage KMR to name this tool as they see fit and take ownership and make it quite clear that this tool is a distinct thing. It's aligned to a broader program. You're benefiting from the investment in the broader program and the risk management that's kind of ongoing, that you've now got a really firm, secure team, but this thing should be a distinct and notable KMR product. It's part of the KMR whole. The second question was cost to date. There aren't any costs to date in procuring this thing have been absorbed in the general budget that I manage within Healthy Waters under Dekessa's nod. So there is no cost to date, as it were. And then, John, as you said, yeah, the 267K in kind is there really to support the product owner and the project managers to deliver for KMR. It'll be an internalized kind of in-kind cost from us, and there'll be additional costs, as you've noted, but part of the broader KMR project team for us to engage on. The only other thing I'd say, John, is maybe the degree of engagement of other councils and other teams. That's a bit of an unknown quantum at this point, but we do have a pretty firm plan in place for helping to deliver that via a technical reference group.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Sayers, your last question was around the contingency and whether that would need to come back to the joint committee. My preference, honestly, we hadn't quite thought that through in terms of the resolutions here, but my preference would be that that would be an executive decision, that would be a managerial decision within the KMR. If there's a preference for that to come back to the Joint Committee, I'm very happy with that, but we're trying not to bother you with too many sort of things here. I think it should be sufficient that this is recorded in the paper as a contingency, and so we've covered it off that way. But I'm happy to get feedback on that.
Kia ora, John. Can I pass over to Malcolm Welsh?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just through you just to finish off that questioning. I don't know if you'd like to comment on that idea about the contingency, Mr. Chair, if you're happy to leave it with the executive, if we felt it wanted to come back to us, maybe a lead from you on that. I'd follow your lead. And when it comes to moving this motion, Tammy, I'm very happy to move it.
Okay.
And
All right.
satisfied with the answers. Thank you.
No, thank you. There's a number of points that I think we should consider as a joint committee on those matters that have come up. Some, I think 2 or 3 of them have clarified, but happy to keep rolling the questions out, and we'll try and get a summary of a sort before putting the motion, the rest of the recommendation. Kia ora, Malcolm.
Kia ora. Yeah, I'll probably just firstly just acknowledging the often standard benefits of direct commission, I guess, is what we're talking about. And probably just on top of that, given we're stepping outside of policy, and just wanting to make sure we're very, I guess, transparent and clear in that process of stepping outside of policy. We've got everything covered, and probably on the top of that is maybe a question: is our poutātaki very close to this, given we're stepping outside of policy? And I guess I remain close to this decision and obviously support it.
Kia ora, Malcolm. I won't speak for the poutātaki just yet. No, sorry, kidding. In terms of the transparency and the process we're following, yes, I mean, this is exactly why we're coming to you with a paper that sets this out so that there's a clear decision-making train behind it. I should say also that this is a significant investment. We all acknowledge that, and a significant build and a very important part of the digital tool package, overall package for the KMR program. We will be reporting back to the Joint Committee on progress on this over time. It wouldn't be necessarily every meeting, but it's certainly we're not intending to keep everybody in the dark and then have something prepared a year or so hence. So there's a commitment here to report back to make sure that matters are transparent and to do that. And if I could ask Justine just to comment on her oversight of this. My assumption is that again it's an important investment, and this will be carefully managed.
Just before we do pass it over to Justine, just ask people to keep an eye on the chat bar. There's some responses coming through there as well. And do you have a comment, Justine?
Yes, so I had put something in the chat, but in brief, obviously I will be focusing on this from a delivery perspective and from a risk perspective, also from an opportunity one, and I'd propose to report on this, including budget, very regularly, and that's a conversation to be had after the 6th of December, what type of information going forward you would like as the Joint Committee, but that thinking is where I'm presently at, if that's helpful. But yes, I'm very aware of the need to for large IT investments and projects to keep senior and strategic eyeballs on them.
Justine, can we go back to our questions, Virginia?
Kia ora, Tammy. My question's a little bit on the same lines as Malcolm, because we're going to be bypassing the procurement process. So are we setting a I can understand the benefits, costs and all that sort of thing, but are we setting a precedent for future procurements when we're looking at, more things in the future? And also, John, I think you talked about a Kaipara Uri person would be in the background. Who would that be? Do you have anyone in mind yet, or thank you?
To answer your first question, Virginia, and thank you. In terms of a precedent, I don't necessarily think this is setting a precedent. Every time the KMR looks to procure, we will be asking that question. Is this an immediate go-to-market, or is this something where there's an existing provider? You will necessarily do that. The direction is to go to market, but you would always want to ask that question. Here, the circumstances are unique because, well, not unique, sorry, the circumstances are very specific in that there's a considerable investment in existing build that's taken place, and we're capitalising on that. So I think, as the paper sets out, this is quite a specific situation. In terms of a Kaipara Uri person, no, we haven't identified anybody yet. We'd want somebody at an operational level from within one of the Kaipara Uri entities, and preferably somebody who's got their eye on digital systems and matters and monitoring and the kind of engagement dimensions around there. We're very conscious that this is a partnership, and we're not seeking to we're seeking to be inclusive of the organisations as well. There is a dimension here where you'll recall that within the memorandum of understanding for the program, new intellectual property that is developed by the program is owned jointly by all members to it. So that's an important linkage here that we want to make sure we keep. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Virginia. Alan Wilcox.
Kia ora tātou. Yes, just in terms of my role as acting Potataki, yes, I have been fully involved in the conversations. One of the first conversations that I had much earlier on was, do we need this tool? And we had several conversations around that, and I'm quite convinced that it is the right thing. And of course, the results of all of those conversations and all of that work were presented to you at the workshop that we had a month or so ago. And I think that everyone on the joint committee was very, very comfortable with that. The second question that I asked was, what are our alternative suppliers, or what are our supply options? And our supply options are very limited. And even more limited when we consider the fact that Auckland Council are already well advanced. And as John mentioned earlier on, there had been a contestable procurement process gone through by Auckland Council sometime earlier. So from my point of view, I think that was satisfied. In addition to that, there is in terms of proportions of investment, and I wouldn't want to speak about something that I'm not certain about, but my understanding was that there was a much greater investment in this tool because of its potential usage across the Auckland area than KMR will be contributing. So on that basis, we were leveraging off an existing situation. So from that point of view, I think it's this kind of a procurement process that we're taking is exceptional, if not unique. And on that basis, I think it was very worthwhile us to just leverage off the current situation rather than us, trying to go through a whole de novo process in which we start from square one and we build it from the bottom up. In fact, that would have been counterproductive, a lot more expensive, and probably wouldn't have arrived at where we've got to right now. So I'm very, very comfortable in terms of justification of the decision or recommendations that have happened during the time that I've been involved in this role. Thank you.
Kia ora, Alan. Just pass to Malcolm Nicholson.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I can just confirm to the committee that this won't be precedent setting. Every single case will be tested against the policy on a case-by-case basis. So the committee can be assured that should you decide to make this decision, that it won't bind you in the future in terms of a precedent.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Kia ora koutou. Through the chair. Ka pai matutame.
All right, carry on.
Through the chair, I'd just like to acknowledge the presentations that actually have come from Tom, Duncan, Nick, John Hutton. The clarification that were in those presentations, just picking up on your kōrero, Alan Wilcox. And I guess we're at a place where I was excited about science meeting with mātauranga and how we can take that forward together. And I think that's really exciting. The mihi that and the presentations that were put forward were very detailed. And I think it was rounded up when I read that it will maximise the environmental and employment and related social and cultural outcomes. I think that's exciting for us as Kaipara Uri. So kia ora koutou. Once again, those presentations were pretty great and they were pretty detailed. Kia ora.
Okay. I'll assume that Malcolm Nicholson's hand hasn't been taken down yet. And just wanted to comment on the name for this tool, as Greg says, has put it. I think, like Matakura, we've got a bit of an opportunity to brand this thing, to brand this opportunity, rather than concocting a name. And by that, I mean there's a wider opportunity than just the title or the name. The kind of markings, branding, the direction that this is all heading. It's a little bit like the discussion we're having now. New territory, and think of it in terms of where we want to be at the point of hand on heart saying the sediment has been reduced by 50%. If you start from that point and work backwards and think of it as the tools to get us there, it gets away from the emotional links and connections. So form and function of the brand, normally would enhance the kind of name that comes to it. So I think that the opportunity to keep that front and center of the developments as well. And because things could change as the direction and the shape of it starts to form accordingly. And just want to follow up on the comments raised by Cherie. It is exciting. Tom, Nick, and John. And I do want to congratulate you three in particular, apart from John Hutton, for, I don't know how you've done it, but John Hutton's sort of delivery is becoming so concise and accurate and precise, and it's like, oh, mate. I mean that in a context of Greg, the opportunity. I think it is to brand, and like the same as the time we took to give Kaipara Matakura its own unique sort of cover, if you like, headlines. I think this here as an option should sit in the same way. While it's under development, I think we should be tossing a few ideas around, and that's open to everyone. So please don't sort of take it that we're not interested or anything like that. No. We want to do it all right, and we want to make it so distinctive that the whole question of intellectual property stays within this mix. But thank you for those discussions, and are we in a position to go through those recommendations before we put the motion?
Mr. Chair, I just a note that Danielle has her hand up.
Oh,
She can see on
sorry.
the screen.
You have to, Danielle. My apologies, Danielle.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Can I just ask, thank you for the IP. I was going to ask that question, John, but you've answered that. But then who gets access to this information? Will it be put on the councils, both councils' geomaps as a public layer, or will it be held just for staff and for our tautautaki?
I'll pass it over to Tom as to what's happening currently with
Yeah, sure.
the freshwater management tool in Auckland.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an awesome question. Again, anything you brand and anything you own, particularly this sort, is going to be incredibly valuable. And I think you do want to be careful about how you share the information. It's certainly a lesson we're going through now, where we've gone through a process of publicising much of the context in peer-reviewed reports. And that'll be the approach adopted here, is we embed that information in there so that if anyone of the public has interest in what you're doing and how your investment is otherwise satisfying your needs, they can go back and find out the methodology and the detail and feel confident about the approach that's taken. But the raw data itself produced by this will be entirely yours, KMR, to decide how to manage and how to present. My suggestion there would be that through the combination of the team behind the tool, knowing what the data is and isn't fit for, and the decisions you want to make, we ultimately entrust you to decide how that sits. We're embedding some of our data sets within Auckland Council's GeoMap service, particularly stuff around catchment context and water quality. That's largely at the moment internal. We're not looking to go external on that just yet, because we've got to be quite careful about how we weave our different stories together about water quality. There's a lot of information on water quality out there. And last thing you want to do is particularly with farmers and others, is kind of create doubt by sowing numerous conversations. And so ultimately I'm sat here kind of going, I'll provide the data. We'll get it out to you. We'll scrutinize it and make sure it's fit for purpose. But that decision of what happens to it, that's not a council decision in my head. That is the KMR's decision. That'll be coming back to yourselves and Matakura to kind of make a decision as to what's fit. What is the best way of disseminating that information?
Thanks, Nick. Sorry, Tom. Nick
right.
Brown, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Well, just that we're working our way through that process at the moment. Like we're, making our governing body aware of where we've got to with production of this information. We've got to go to our Kaitiaki forum and ask their opinion. For myself personally, I like getting the information out to the public, and certainly with the work that we did with Safe Swim in the Auckland region, that was a beneficial thing to do, for everyone to know what the issues were, and then to be able to drive towards the solutions and influence both local and central government to keeping the eye on outcomes longer term. But yeah, working through what we're putting on geomaps at the moment, and also the information that we need for the likes of plan changes and investment decisions might not be so consumable for the general public, and so trying to work out what the form is that we can best serve it up to make it digestible for them. But luckily, I guess Auckland Council's doing that thinking at the moment, and some of that thinking may or may not be useful for you when you get to make that decision in kind of a year's time.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. It might be something the committee might want to think about later, as if we have external parties wishing to access this data. It could be something, it is generally very valuable. It might be something we want to be able to sell and generate income from for the right people that are wishing to use it. But it's something just to think about in the future.
Kia ora, Danielle. Well, look, just before handing it back to maybe go through those recommendations, the 3 recommendations. John Hutton and Tom and Nick, I think that the background and the advent and the lead up to the Safe Swim program may provide some insights for the joint committee, and if we could organise some kind of link to that information. I mean, those early days of talking this sort of stuff through with Surfing New Zealand and Water Care and Healthy Waters and Andrew Sholem and company, John Hutton, that was like, it was blank canvas stuff really, and of course alongside of that was the Auckland Regional Public Health Services. And I mean, even for people to understand the process involved in collecting samples at wastewater treatment plant. I mean, it is so much sort of conspiracy floating around out there. Paints a picture of how disconnected all this can become. And I think you're right, Tom. The theories are countless out there, and just an idea to follow on from Danielle's last line of questions: the Safe Swim program and how that has provided more of an assurance to people on what is happening on the monitoring front. I think gives us more insight and maybe something that people could find useful. So we are in a position to go through those recommendations. John, would you like to lead us through, and we can perhaps call for the whole lot to be put together?
I'm just conscious that there's one outstanding question, which is what Councillor Sayers asked at the beginning around the 70,000 we've identified as a contingency. If I could put this in a positive form and just say, my recommendation would be that is the use of the contingency becomes an operational decision from within the Māori Kura. If that's acceptable, or sorry, if there are any objections to that approach being taken, if we could canvass that from the elected members, that would be good. Otherwise, I think we can just take this conversation as an okay for that.
Okay, you heard from John Hutton. Any objections to what's been raised here? Okay, Greg Sayers did suggest that he was prepared to put the motion, and he's indicated so. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Amy MacDonald for recommendations 2, 3, and 4 of item number. John Hutton, please.
5.1.
Item number 5.1. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Moving to agenda item 5.0. It's coming up. It's just gone 5 minutes past our. We'd scheduled a pit stop, 10-minute pit stop, 15-minute pit stop. So can we reconvene at 11:20? Give people an opportunity. And sorry, I can't share my walnut and date loaf with you, but I've got a nice hot cup of coffee here, and see you all about 20 past 11. Kia ora ra.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Thank you very much for that kind acknowledgement of me, mate. It has not been an easy old time, I can tell you. It's been a very rough and visceral time in my community, but thank you very much for your...
No, we've been sort of, I've been part of 4 different Zooms, and one of them is trying to keep the connection going between this end of Ngāti Whātua and with our relations who live in that South Auckland catchment. And boy, oh boy, it's like, it's not till you sit down with guys like Tony Kake and they start relaying what's going on in that Papakura end, and then odd times I do have a cup of tea and a catch up with Rangi McLean.
Yeah.
We've been sort of chipping away at how to get sort of more connected.
It's down
This
to
is still being recorded live, gentlemen. It's not being turned off, so you might want to be aware of that.
I'm comfortable with with my reflections being recorded, guys. But thank you. It is getting down to street by street now, and the vaccination work is. I mean, the vaccination work is successful, but it is challenging. Because there is quite a degree of lack of understanding of the impacts of a poor uptake of vaccinations, and people don't discover that until they get sick.
That's right, and that's the downside of it. And the frightening thing are these. Well, in the north here, Daniel, 2 of the last half a dozen admissions to Pāngere Hospital have been babies. One 6-week old, the other one 8-week old.
Yeah,
like, man.
As people start to home isolate, it's accelerating the spread of COVID. Now, if people have been vaccinated and they get COVID, that's one thing, but it is there is a risk there for young people, and I've seen as a 12-year-old that I know of in Kerry Hill in my ward, who is due to get her vaccination within a few days of a COVID exposure event, ends up in hospital with pneumonia.
Whoa.
It's a pretty shocking and confronting situation. But so look, thank you for the reflections, and my encouragement everywhere for those outside of Tāmaki Makaurau is to get on with the task of getting vaccinated, because it's one thing to confront COVID when you're 90% vaccination coverage, but when you've only got 20% vaccination coverage, that's what happened in South Auckland, and that's a scary bit.
Okay, well done, Daniel.
Thanks, mate. And I'm very happy that was recorded.
Good on you.
How was that Dayton walnut loaf, Tammy?
Yep, very nice, thank you.
You could have put some through the phone. Oh.
One of our neighbours called around and dropped off a couple of jars of honey and a Dayton walnut loaf. Oh. Good. I was going up the road the other day and there's a bloody couple of cows and calves on the road. My God. Sunday night, just gone dark, and oh well. Had a look around and didn't know where they'd come from, and opened the nearest gate and put them in there, back in the paddock. And
Wrong farm?
no, it was the right farm.
They got you some honey and a date loaf.
Yeah,
Tremendous. Well done.
I think I'll go back up tonight and let them out again.
Yeah, now.
So tell me, the cases in the north, are they still climbing?
Oh, they're pretty slow. Like the ones that are worrying are the unconfirmed links. And there's been a few that are waiting for confirmation of tests. But like Tahoe Snow was reporting, the big thing is the sort of early notification and how the connections were made quite quickly around those cases in Dargaville, and making sure that the support is in place for those families. Thankfully, the mother and the 30-year-old mother and her 8-week baby were released from hospital, and they're back in.
They're okay.
Yeah, back in Poto.
Gosh.
Isolating. But you know, support is there. Okay. We're just gone. No, kia ora, Jane.
Kia ora, Tame, just through the chair. I realise we're on live. Are we on live now? Yes, we are. It says. Just want an appreciation to Nick Brown for answering my question about the Three Waters. Yeah, I had thought that this would be an opportunity, another innovative opportunity for us to influence that particular kaupapa in any which way.
Okay. All right. Well, it's 11:22, and thank you once again, and recommence our meeting and call it to order. Move to agenda item 5.2. I will assume that people have the purpose in front of them related to the financial status and minor budget adjustments. We have Alan Wilcox to lead us through those discussions.
Right.
And a message here from the live streaming. We can recommence the live streaming, please. And in going through the presentation, can we ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, please?
Kia ora, I move. I'll second.
Moved by Virginia Warriner, seconded by Jane Sherrard, and hand the time over to Alan Wilcox. Kia ora, Alan.
Kia ora,
Kia ora, Tami. Kia ora koutou anō. You've got the report in front of you from pages 15 to 24 on your agenda. And essentially there's a report which is page 15 to 18. And then there are two attachments. One begins on page 19 through to page 23, which is essentially a budget and then a report, a variance analysis report dated the end of September. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the October variance analysis report out until Friday, and I haven't circulated because it's just another level of confusion, and I'm not certain that it adds huge amount of value to the underlying principles that we're going to be looking at anyway. And then on page 24 is a year 2 work program and budget with proposed allocation changes. So essentially, it's taken some time for us to get this financial status report to you. for two reasons. One is that you approved the overall work program and budget earlier on in this calendar year, in time for the beginning of this financial year, which of course was 1 July when it began. But the overall budget also had some carry forwards from last year, and we weren't quite certain where they were going to land until probably sometime in September, when we were able to tidy everything up and make sure that we'd had the right analysis done. And then, of course, audit also had an input into that. So we've been able to do that now, and effectively the budget that we're reporting on from page 19 through to 23 is the actual budget for the year. I'd also, in my role as acting Poutataki, had felt reasonably comfortable that all of the money was as it should be, and that there was nothing that was going to cause us any major problems. I was aware of one or two hiccups, which I'll cover in a minute, but at the same time, I felt quite comfortable that our expenditure was well within, was constrained and well within the budget envelopes that we had. However, while I intuitively knew that, I didn't actually know that. So now, as of the September report, and then also confirmed by the October report, we know the exact amounts that have been in different areas, so the facts are actually presented to us, and that's given me a great degree of comfort that my intuition was reasonably correct. So hence the reason why this report has come to you. What we also found, though, is we took the opportunity to have a look and just see where we were and how we were tracking with respect to expenditure for the year as a whole, and whether or not we needed to make any minor transfers. We've also, in developing this report, had a quick consultation with the Ministry for the Environment, and they agree with us that the suggested transfers are minor and that they don't have any implications for the work program or for the deed of settlement, the deed of funding, which of course for anything major requires a formal verification from them. So with that in mind, if you have a look perhaps on I'll just go through the summary because I think, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. If we have a look at that on page 15, essentially from a bottom line financial point of view in terms of status, we've got more than sufficient money to cover everything that we're looking at. And in fact, our biggest challenge is going to be able to get that large amount of money out the door by the 30th of June this coming year. And but we can talk a little bit about how we might do that should the committee so wish. Within the budget itself, in terms of operating expenditure, if you have a look at all of the codes on page 19 through 23, you can see that they're also well within their budget envelopes. So there are no issues there. I'm also comfortable that tracking in terms of, while I haven't done a detailed cash flow analysis for each of those areas, I'm reasonably comfortable that we are well within the expenditure patterns that we had envisaged. I have done a much more detailed analysis of the Matakura budget in terms of bringing the staff on, the cost of salaries, and the expectations of various other costs. So I have looked at that in some detail, and I'm very comfortable that we are in a healthy position and that we shouldn't be overspending in that area. One of the things that we found out, though, in just reviewing the budget is that initially, and if you recall going back a year now, we had identified in the first year some 550,000 for Matakura staff training and for training of field advisors. And at that stage, we had thought of bringing in the tertiary institutions, specifically NorthTech, and we had wanted them to carry out that training. However, Duncan, in consultation with others, has suggested that we can achieve a very good high level of training supported by the New Zealand Association of Resource Management at a level which is much more cost effective. So what I've suggested is that we take 350,000 from that budget. That still gives 200,000 in that training budget. to allow all sorts of activities to take place. And in fact, there's more than what we estimate our expenditure will be. So there's still quite a significant amount of wriggle room, if you like, within that budget. But we take that 350,000 and look at how we can spend that a little bit more effectively. One of the areas, and perhaps the only area which has got some area of concern about it, was in the Tepayaka native root project. I think it was originally called the Root project, and the chair suggested that we rename it, and so it's been named Tepayaka. And essentially what that's looking at is the root tensile strength of plants on stream banks, different plant species, and seeing how they stand up in different conditions. That required quite a bit of field work and field testing, which was unable to be done, or has been unable to be done, during periods of COVID lockdown in the Auckland area. And as a result of that, we've had contractors on the payroll, but not able to actually do their work. And it's also been slightly under budgeted, but the bulk of that suggested $70,000 that we're suggesting to transfer into that area comes as a direct result of COVID. We have taken consultation with the Ministry for the Environment as to how COVID would impact on our budget and where we have situations like this. And their view in essence was that for the Job for Nature projects, this is happening across the motu, and it was a situation that others are also involved in, and their encouragement was for us to keep going to make sure that people are not displaced from their jobs. Otherwise the government would have to pay out of another likely have to pay out of another pocket anyway, but to keep moving forward, and that we can resolve this matter afterwards. I don't think there was a written guarantee that it would not have any impact on our budget, but it's something that we would be able to work out with them. So on that basis, we've kept moving forward. So we're suggesting that 70,000 or 70,000 of that 350,000 be transferred into Tepayaka. The second area that we're looking at is we've got two pieces of work out for contract at the moment, out for tender at the moment. They are going through the contestable process of being advertised for tender, and expressions of interest are being requested, and requests for tender are coming through. We had put in a fairly tight budget in both of those areas, and we're really not certain what's going to come out of the tenders process. So rather than us do something now and then come back to you at the next meeting and say, well, actually, we've got something which tenders which may have been responded over what we've budgeted for, we thought, well, let's cover ourselves a little bit, and we've suggested that an extra $50,000 be put into the as contingencies into the wetland features, and also into the eroding land features areas, which is essentially aerial photograph and various other detection means in which we can identify where wetlands are, what their features are, how, and then that can be input into how we manage them, as well as input into the freshwater management tool in due course. So we're suggesting $50,000 go into that as well. Now, the third area is that we're suggesting some more money go into is in the Kaipara nursery strategy. Within the Matakura budget, we had originally budgeted some 300,000 for consultants. And what we had intended to do was to take money from that budget and to do some of the things that we needed to do in terms of follow-up with respect to the accreditation of nurseries and the accreditation of contractors. There were several things that needed to be done there. One is that we needed to actually establish, if you like, almost a warrant or a specification, if you like, of fencing, a specification of planting, and what are the standards that we required. For the planting side of things, we wanted the nursery team to do that. For the contracting side of things, we had employed GWE to carry out that work, and they have now completed that work. So we now have specifications for fencing, for minor contracting. We also have costings, and there are different costings in the northern part of the catchment to the southern part of the catchment. And we also have the specifications for planting, and we have diagrams, etc. All of that, together with the other standards that we are wanting, such as standards around health and safety, around the kind of protocols that the Matakura staff would operate, we are putting into a comprehensive guide, and a comprehensive planting guide, and a comprehensive set of quality standards, if you like. And they will be put on the website, and they will be the substance of training activity for Matakura staff and also for field advisors. So we're suggesting that 130,000 be allocated into that area. We've put it into the bucket of nursery strategy, but it does cover all of those areas, including the accreditation of the nurseries and the accreditation of the other contractors. So that's where we're suggesting that 120,000 goes. In essence, it still keeps the 300,000 that's budgeted for consultants in the Matakura budget free of encumbrance, which would allow the new potataki coming in to be able to identify those areas that she would like to go, obviously in consultation with yourselves, as to what additional work and strategic orientation that Justine might want with respect to things moving forward. So that's essentially just a replacement budget. The third area that we felt could absorb some of this additional money was in the catchment reference group projects. Essentially, this is projects which will be accessed under the Whenua Whānui Fund, and I'd always felt that we had under budgeted in that area. As you're well aware, there is a one-for-one in-kind contribution as opposed to contribution from the from KMR, and the amount that we had budgeted for management activity or support activity around that, I'd always felt was a little bit low. So I'm suggesting that that goes into the catchment reference group budget, which would assist the Whenua Whānui Fund, and in addition to that, it would go into the direct remediation activities. So I think, in essence, I think that I'm just recommending that we essentially note the current healthy financial position, and then make a number of transfers, which are internal transfers, which are considered to be minor, within the work program, and will enable us to move forward with a degree of comfort, and we can achieve all of the outcomes that we want without these transfers, but essentially they are nice to have and will make it clean and tidy, and fewer explanations at the end of the year. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, while people are organising their reactions, can I just ask a couple of points of clarification? Maybe common knowledge, but is everyone aware of who GWE are? Just as a point of information. Can you just?
Yes, it was like they are an engineering contracting firm, and we got them to look at some of the pricing and the costing. They are working in areas around this kind of rural contracting area, but they also do quite a lot of other urban stormwater civil engineering activity. Yeah, so they were a credible firm that we felt that we could rely on. And if people said, well, where did you get this information from? What was the specification? Where did you get these prices from? We can say, well, look, we've actually gone to a firm which we have confidence in, and it's got some credibility in the marketplace.
Good, thank you. Kia ora, Amy.
Kia ora Tame. Thank you, Alan. I just had a question around the Tepayaka project and completely understand the reasons given. Just wondering how we are working to mitigate that risk ongoing. Just that I understand lockdowns may be more of a thing of the past as we move forward with management of COVID in our communities. But yeah, just wondering how we can make sure future disruptions due to COVID don't have similar impacts on productivity and budgets. I'm sure you're working on it and it's not unique to KMR, but yeah, just keen to know that we are looking ahead for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I'll take that as a rhetorical question and give you a response and discuss with the management team and give you a response in due course, because right now off the top of my head I don't actually have a response.
Sure, through the chair. Oh, there's kia ora, Tame.
Yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora. The reduction of 350,000 from the advisor training and accreditation, is that from a pure reallocation exercise, or did we meet the quota that we envisioned for advisors for training?
Yes, in terms of numbers, that's still in process, but we can't remember the numbers that we had the other day, whether it was John might be able to help me here, or Duncan, whether it was 16 or 20 odd, but we certainly have a significant number that we'll be training, and we'll be training those in at least 2 blocks. One is a block that will be happening from the 29th of November through to the 3rd of December. And so those field advisors, we will have enough to get things moving. And then we've got another block of training which will take place in the new year. We had intended to have another block as well. So I think we're going to be reasonably well served in terms of the number of field advisors. That's not an issue. We've just been able to, I think the reason being is that I'm not certain that we knew, to be honest, exactly what the cost of training would be through the tertiary institutions. And I think we have been able to just cost it out, bring on some very credible people to help Duncan and Sarah Nolan with the training, and also cost out the venues. And I'm quite comfortable that the team has done quite a solid costing exercise, and it's a lot less than what we had originally budgeted for. And we can still have 2 or 3 sessions well within that $200,000 envelope, which they have, which is still quite considerable.
Oh, cool.
But as it is training, we can potentially look at other training activities for that as well.
Kia ora. Thank you, Ellen. That there leads me to my other question of rohe-wide allocations for advisor trainers and venues in both northern Kaipara as well as the southern Kaipara, using Te Whare Oranga and those types of venues as in kind from the actual Kaipara Uri entity. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jane. Yeah, definitely we are looking at different venues, and we are looking, originally we were wanting to look fairly well smack in the middle, but because of COVID situations, we're moving them both south and north. But at the same time, we want to move things around the catchment a little bit. Yeah.
Kia ora.
The other thing you might just be aware too, we've been very conscious that we have been looking at Uri representatives, or also representatives of different Māori organisations or Māori affiliated organisations as well, that would want to have field advisor training. One of the ways that we're looking at it is particular wards, if you like, or patches or rohi for each of these field advisors, so that there's no overlap. And we wanted to make sure that there is a sufficient number to cover the catchment, and also that there is a diversity so that people can link in with the different land ownership patterns and different groups that might be there.
Kia ora. Thank you for that, Ellen. That answers my other 2 questions. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
if there are no further questions, I just ask Ellen if he has an opportunity to have a look at the chat bar, and there's a suggestion on there that might be you might want to comment on.
Yes, I think Justine's just raised a couple of questions there. One is that it is an informal qualification as opposed to it being a formal qualification. However, the people involved in that are senior people in the New Zealand Institute or New Zealand Association of Resource Management, and they are of the view that people who go through this training would be then eligible for membership of that professional body, if you like. So I think there's that dimension to that. So it's certainly not a full qualification, if you like. The other dimension that we do, and we probably, to be honest, haven't thought fully through, in part because we haven't seen exactly where the government position is landing with respect to freshwater management plans and what would be required to move the workforce from there into the next stage. But I think we've got a reasonable amount of pūtea left within the budget for us to be able to pick that up, particularly within this year. Next year, there may need to be some further allocation from training to be able to bring people into the requirements which are necessary for a full freshwater management plan training consistent with the government requirements. The other area too is that the Matakura budget as a whole this year also has to absorb quite a lot of recruitment costs. We're optimistic, and I think that we're not going to have all of those recruitment costs next year. So there's a significant saving there into the future year. So I think there are ways of achieving a consistent level of budget expenditure. In fact, my forecasting was that the Matakura budget would drop in the next financial year. Having said that, I think we need to think through that a little bit more carefully, and in doing that, come back to you with that budget. So I wouldn't want to be too predictive about what might happen next year, but I don't think that there are any huge implications of the decisions that we've made in the following financial year. John's also made a comment on our chat too with respect to moving forward. You might want to verbalise that, John.
Yeah, through you, Tame. Thank you. Just in terms of forward budget planning, while we've got projections of where the money would flow across the life of the program, we do need to go into a year 3 planning cycle, which would be March, April next year. And a bit like this year, we would develop up a budget, provide that to MFE for review, have that come back, and then have an approval of that in June next year, ready for the new financial year. That said, there are projects that we're undertaking right now that we know will extend into the year 3 area, so we'll extend through the balance of next year into the new financial year and beyond. So those projects, I mean, the freshwater management tool paper that we've just had, that for example is a project that is going to be cutting across financial years. So we've got budget identified for those, but the kind of granulated, much more specific budget analysis for different projects, that's up for consideration in the new year. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thanks, John.
Kia ora, John. Any further comments from the members? Just while we're considering that, and thank you, Alan. I am aware of on-job training and the opportunity and option to assess current and prior learning. Whether that falls inside informal or informal is immaterial in my mind, there is a level of value that we must be considerate of in terms of the nature of the work we're entering into, and how we're trying to bring people up to speed with skills, knowledge, techniques that may not have been, previously appeared in other such formal qualifications. And with that, of course, we know of what's happening in that whole tertiary education space, and like to encourage us to always take the view that second chance education, training and development must be seen as a total package. And this is not about aligning ourselves to just the education component of that. There's an element of reliance upon people's lived experiences. The fact that they can put up a 7-wire fence and it's still standing 25 years later. I'm not sure whether you can find it in any handbook, but it's normally a sort of, part of the reputational profiling that goes on when you take anyone on to do some fencing on your own private property. However, it's just a comment there.
Can I just also comment on that, Mr. Chair? There's also a dimension of this training which is unique. The history of KMR, the history of the Moana and Whātuatanga, of course, that's all part of this training as well. So it's not just simply about the more technical dimensions of, as you say, the 7-wire fences and that will stand up and the planting, but it's got a significant amount of engagement with landowners, land ownership patterns, and the kinds of things which are important to you as the Joint Committee and as partners to the Memorandum of Understanding. So we've built that into the process as well. So just want to clarify that, and we're feeling pretty positive about it, to be honest, in terms of the breadth of it, and so it goes beyond just the simple technical dimensions of it.
Good. If we have no further questions, comments from the members, are we in a position to call for someone to move and a seconder, please, for the recommendations as per agenda item 5.2?
Danielle.
Moved by Danielle. Do we have a seconder?
Aye.
Seconded by Jane Sherrod for the adoption of the recommendations under agenda item 5.3 presented by Alan Wilcox. 5.2, my apologies, regarding the financial status and minor budget adjustments. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? Kia ora. Moving on to agenda item 5.3, meeting schedule between February and December of 2022. And prior to asking Sandra Harris to talk us through that, someone moved that we receive this agenda item, moved by Virginia, seconded by do we have a seconder?
Danielle, I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Seconded by Danielle. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? Any abstentions? We'll hand it over to you, Sandra.
Kia ora. On the 20th of September, we submitted a plan for 2022, an idea of how we would like to run the meetings, or how the date, sorry. So we alternated between the formal meeting and the workshop, and it's in line with our MFE requirements as well. So these dates were based around our public holidays as well as the availability of each of the Joint Committee members. So the dates are there from February after the Christmas New Year rest time, starting back up in February.
Do you have it handy that you can put up on a screen?
Sure, one moment.
Okay, while Sandra's putting that together, what I think is important to while I see the dates, while I see the dates there, what I think is important is that we don't lose sight of our startup of taking these meetings to a marae level, and irrespective of well, obviously we didn't have COVID when we made those.
It's a stop sharing here. Sorry.
Slight techo issue.
Thank you for that, Sandra.
No, you're right. Yeah, so you go back onto Zoom.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Matua Tamia, about the importance of us going back to the marae.
No. Hang on. Share screen again. That one. Yep. And you go share at the bottom right. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Right. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, if we can go to the top of that document, what we'd like to put to the joint committee today is, as far as possible, to retain the option that we set out as a joint committee to hold the formal meetings on the marae.
Tautoko.
Tautoko.
Ai, tautoko, Tami.
As far as possible.
Yeah, particularly the formal meetings.
Yeah.
Aye, tautoko.
So we'll come back with a sort of plan after we discuss that. You know, the pattern that we tried to follow was to do a circuit in the northern end, Urioho, and back to Kaipara, and do a circuit that way. So we'll try and populate those dates with some options of availability and opportunities, and of course also add in their venues for our workshops face to face where possible.
So, kia ora through the chair. Tautoko, our formal meetings remaining on marae to ensure the engagement at that level with our Kaipara Uri whānau, and also to bring that others come to the marae, you know, to be part of the program, which has happened, and for our hokainga presentations as well. The query, our every alternative workshops, which are quite robust workshops. So Ngā Maunga had made the offer of Te Whare Oranga, given the recent changes there, to cover off the southern end as well. So I just wanted to put that into the mix through the chair, Tami. Oh,
Okay.
and we did have some discussion with Tarawapa as well for the 21st of September, but I'm yet to get confirmation from them. So I shall go back to the booking to Janie for the booking of that. Kia ora.
And I guess before we move to Greg says, Jane, can we try and follow the pattern between both Te Aroha and Rewiti, and give them an opportunity to populate maybe the first two of the options to come into the Kaipara rohe.
Kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora, Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Tami, are you suggesting that we add into the recommendations? I just can't see them on my screen. Are you asking? Are you going to include them into the recommendations about going to the marae each?
Yeah, we want. Sorry, what I was trying to get is to not to lose sight of that.
Do you want to add it to the recs?
Yeah, yes, if I can.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I certainly endorse it. I'm just curious to better understand how we promote that out, that we're having those meetings. What's the process there? So I just want to get some confidence that, you know, communities get enough of a heads up that it's actually occurring.
Yeah, we've tried to promote it from the 3 entities that are represented on the joint committee, and each of us taking responsibility to work with the marae committees and the organisations that are looking after those venues and the bookings and the likes, and to try and promote the fact that there is a formal meeting at one level, and also where the venues are being used for formal workshops, just the engagement at that level, not so much the participation. And we're trying to promote that from within the membership of the joint committee.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just perhaps a follow up on that. I guess, how effective is that being, and do we need any budget to help promote that through other possible channels?
Perhaps, Mr. Chair, I might contribute a bit to that. There is a significant amount of money in the budget. I think the communications budget has got $260,000 in it. And even with the projected expenditure from the new website, etc., we will only be around about 140,000 of that used at the moment. So there is a significant amount in there that could be used. Ben Hope introduced himself a bit earlier on as starting today our communications lead. In addition to that, we've also got Griffin and Willie, who will now be interacting quite considerably with the marae and with different people around the rohi. So I would expect to see communications generally ramp up, and it's at the right time too, because we've now got some capacity for people in the field to actually do something and get sedimentation reduction plans carried out. So we're at a time now where we can considerably ramp up our communications and engage a lot more. So I think we've all felt that we've done our best within the resources that we've got, but the very reason to increase these resources is to make sure we do a lot more. And I think we're in a position to be able to do that right across the board, including to hokainga of the marae, and to engage in a way that ramps that up as well.
Oh, wonderful. I take great confidence from that answer, Alan. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I pass it over to Malcolm Welsh?
Oh, kia ora, Tami. I probably just stepping a little sideways, but still very relevant to our meetings. I guess potentially with the borders opening up, and I know you touched on it, Tami, is subject to condition to the landscape, I guess. But in that conversation, there's a prediction we could be facing a whole lot of health issues in our communities, health and well-being in our communities. And I guess that rolling that forward as a KMR, and I know it sits in our risk management, but I guess in this context and probably in the wider context, I'd just like to get a bit more, confidence of how we're going to deal with that. If communities are shutting down, closing up, locking up, their focus will shift to health and safety and well-being.
Yeah.
And potentially stop our program. And so I'm just keen to make sure we're paying that some due diligence in the mitigation side. And what does that mean?
Yeah, I guess thank you for that, Malcolm. It is certainly the other side of the comment made. We started off with this approach, and it's important to see the cycle or the circle completed. We're not breaking it halfway to sort of say, you know, we certainly want to follow that line of connection and alignment with those communities. And last thing we want is to be in there competing for their time and use of those sort of communal facilities, but definitely remind us that it is part of our risk profiling as we move this forward. But good point. Thank you for that, Councillor Daniel Newman.
Yeah, kia ora, Tami. I guess following on from that, you know, I'm comfortable with the schedule for marae visits is fine, although I'm not sure that, I mean, every elected member's got to have their election and be successfully returned by October next year, but I think KMR needs to obviously forecast for a diary of hui that will take place regardless. But yeah, I just wonder, with respect to the new world in which we are now moving into, about the health and safety requirements of open hui on marae. Certainly, as somebody who represents a part of Tamaki Makaurau where COVID-19 is now quite widespread, and I'm getting tested every week and I'm fully vaccinated. I am cautious about every public gathering that I go to and how I physically participate in those gatherings. So I would like to understand moving forward how each of those particular visits will take place safely, understanding that for me the obligation is to ensure that I am doing everything I humanly possibly can, not only for my own health, but also for the wider societal health, to ensure that we are protecting people who would otherwise be vulnerable, including people, unfortunately, you know, whose health is compromised by underlying health conditions. And whilst I'm fully vaccinated, I do continue to pose some risk. If I do get COVID, I could transmit it. So thank you. I want to support this, but I want to reflect that, because I think the world is a different world now than it was 6 months ago in the light of Delta and whatever follows after that. Thank you.
Kia ora, Daniel. And look, just really want to emphasise the significance and the importance of those comments from one and all, and maybe Alan, Justine, and the Māori Kura staff. Our options around engagement and communication need to really emphasise this, you know, these points around health and well-being. The same model. We're trying to encourage bottom up, top down, all of those approaches, and there are opportunities I think we must take as the signatories to the MOU and the deed of funding that retains the connection with whatever efforts are going on across our respective 3 entities, and of course aligned with everyone else that's putting in the effort around managing the impact of COVID. 19. Yeah, we have, I think, some options to do something about that message, those messages that come from the joint committee right here, right now, as we complete today's meeting, and hopefully get a just a short paper that we can utilize and circulate out to not only those marae and venues that have hosted us in the past, but to reassure them that we haven't walked away from our commitment and, you know, stated option of connecting our people, the community, with the KMR program. I see we've got Penny Smart with a comment.
Kia ora, Tame. Yeah, certainly agree and acknowledge all the comments that are being made about our marae meetings, and totally agree. My sort of thoughts have moved to workshops, and I would just like to float the idea that given COVID and also given emissions reductions, that we consider holding our workshops via Zoom. I think we're getting a lot more proficient about Zoom. I acknowledge face-to-face is great to get that informal interaction. However, I think that as a committee, maybe we should be seriously considering workshop Zooms with public. Obviously public are excluded anyway, just to set a good role model perhaps. So kia ora.
Thank you, Penny. Appreciate those comments. Tēnā koe, Sheree.
Hi, kia ora tātou. I really think it's imperative that we actually do turn up on the marae, and where we can. It's going to mean some planning. I'm sitting in Waitakere Hospital right now, so we are ahead of what's actually coming. I can show you, I don't have the screen, but this here is the COVID protection framework that sits here right now. In this COVID protection framework kicks in as soon as Daniel Newman's lot in South Auckland get vaccinated. For the 90% that we're looking for within Tamaki Makaurau, so we can move. We are no longer going to any more levels. From this level now, level 3, stage 2, we're looking highly at going to the framework, protection framework. In here, it states definitely that the vaccination certificates will be coming through. In here, it also states that you are able to host up to 100 people on the red light, 50, so it's really all been set in place. I just wouldn't like our people to be getting one lot of information and then we're coming back with another lot of information, i.e. that we're not prepared to meet, yet this has already been put in place, a protection framework. I just think that our Matakura and our communications team will have to work together to actually, so we can see how this can happen. If it can't, we have plenty of notice, and then we go to Zoom. But I would like to see, because in that MOU, it does discuss the well-being of the Kaipara Moana and the Kaipara Uri. For us to monitor and evaluate how that is coming, we need to be on the marae where the Uri are. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora. We'll let Sheree give opportunity to pull her hand down, unless you want another comment. Thank you, one and all. Perhaps the recommendation number 2 on agenda item 5.3, Sandra, could you work with Willie and the communications and engagement people to try and craft a one-pager that takes into account the reference to our risk management component of our strategies, because I think all of this is really saying if we could subject the sediment loading of Kaipara Moana to some kind of COVID framework, then we can go and play tiddlywinks. But you know, it's not going to sort of stop the sediment making its way down the river systems. So I guess the opportunity here is how we try and get ahead of the game, like what's been suggested, create some options. What I think is clear is the message that needs to follow right out to our marae network. In other words, those people that have been part of the formative period of Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee, to make sure that they're informed of the direction we're embarking on for this February to December 2022. The first point about that, we're not walking away from them. We want to stay connected, and we want to keep the alignment with the home bases or the marae bases of their response to managing the impact of COVID. If there's no further comments on there, can we make an amendment to that resolution, second one, and have the addition of an options paper represented to the Joint Committee? Alan, is that doable?
Yes, so essentially I think what you're asking for, or just a recommendation, is that an options paper be brought back to the Joint Committee, identifying how meetings can be held as much as possible on marae, consistent with an appropriate COVID response. That's the kind of, perhaps that kind of wording would be sufficient.
Okay. If there's no further comments, can I have someone move in that direction for item 5.3, recommendation 2?
Yeah, I'm happy to move it, Tami.
Tēnā koe, Georgina. Thank you, Greg Sayers, for seconding that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against? Any abstentions? Carried. Are we looking for agenda item 5.4, progress report from Alan? Alan Walker.
Kia koutou anō. The progress report on page 27 of your agenda, unfortunately the production system that we have for the agenda spitted it out as an attachment rather than as a full agenda item, so I felt shortchanged by that, but as it was going to take us a day to delays to change it, I thought, no, just let it go out. So apologies that it hasn't got the right heading, but I think the content is pretty much the same. Essentially, this report is just bringing you up to speed with things which I thought that the Joint Committee should know. It's based on a no surprises philosophy of you having an understanding of the good things that are happening within the Matakura, and also those things which may affect you, whether negatively or just activities which could well be seen in the public arena and that you would need a heads up on. So the first, of course, is the Matakura staff appointments, and you can see from the wiring diagram that I've provided there, and then sent out the full and appropriate one attached to the agenda reminder that Sandra has sent out, that we have basically now appointed all staff bar two to the Matakura. There's still two vacant positions and staff to be to come on. I think you've been introduced to all of the staff that are here, with the exception of Steph Verstig, who will be taking over as of the 17th of January in the role of the strategic business manager. John, I'm sure John Hutton will always play a role contributing on behalf of Auckland Council, but it won't be in the current role which he has at the moment. So essentially we are not too far away from having a fully occupied Matakura, and I'm sure that as you engage with these staff over a period of time, that you will be as confident as I am that they are a fantastic bunch. So I'm really quite thrilled to sort of be taking a step outside of this direction at the end of this month, and knowing that there is a fantastic staff that that are in the Matakura. So that's where that one is. Happy to answer any questions on any of these. Perhaps I'll just go through everything and then answer questions on all of them. That might be more efficient. The second item there is that we've had communications with all of those landowners who put their hands up and were registered with us as being interested to become part of KMR and to see whether or not they could have sediment reduction plans and have some funding for remediation on their properties. So we've sent out a letter to all of them, and we invited them to the 3 engagement hui. One was earlier last week in person in the Mangakahia Rugby Club. The second one was an online engagement hui at 1 o'clock on Friday. And then the next one is coming up this week. All of these have been north of the border, if you like, and we would like to have one engaging some of those in the southern catchments in due course. But because of the COVID restrictions, we haven't been able to do that. So we'll have to reflect on that a little bit more and just see when and the timing of that kind of hui that we might have. Two key reasons for those hui. One was simply to engage and to identify what the criteria are and get a statement of engagement. And the third one was to get, the second one was to get some feedback on those criteria and to really ground test and say, have we got things right? And we have had quite a bit of feedback from the 2 hui that have happened already, that we do need to adjust, and that there may be some thoughts around how we can streamline it, maybe make it better, clarify things a bit more. And there are some areas which we think, as a result of the discussions that we've had with landowners that we've had already on the site, that we do think that some of the criteria could be changed. But the criteria are as they are, and they are as you have adopted them. But if you recall, you adopted them on the basis of them being provisional, if you like, and that they would be reviewed in due course. So we hope to come back as a result of this feedback with a paper looking at a few of these criteria. The majority, I think, stand and are fine, but there's a few that we think there could be some better refinement of. So we'll come back to you with a paper on that on the 6th of December. And I think that would be more in keeping with what the landowners have fed back to us, as well as some practical situations that have come out of being on the farms and seeing how fencing is, where planting should be, etc., etc. So a bit of feedback on that. So we'll come back to you with that. Tami was at the hui in Mangakahia, but I think that we felt that both of the hui were generally positive. There were a few question marks that came up. There were a few things that we felt we could have done better on, but on the whole, I don't think that there was too much, or any real major negativity or anything that we need to be too worried about. So that's the second item. The third item is that we have selected, I think we had selected a few more. I think we've got 4 land management advisors actually starting this week. And they will be out in the field and doing different bits and pieces following up on those who have put their hands up and actually starting the settlement reduction plan process. In addition to that, because we've entered into that contract with Fonterra, their sustainable dairy advisors are also working in this space now as well. So in the dairy space, settlement reduction plans will be starting to move forward, consistent with the farm environment plans which the dairying group have had. So we now actually can begin a trickle of settlement reduction plans, and if people want to, they can actually get a person to come along to help them with their settlement reduction plans. So we're now actually starting to do the mihi. The fourth item on the agenda at the bottom there is just a confirmation that the Fonterra and the Environs Holdings contracts have been signed. And Fonterra, we've already had some interaction with their sustainable dairy advisors and some ongoing discussions and, if you like, orientation as opposed to training. But all of these people, including two of the land management advisors from Environs, will be involved in the training on the 29th to the 3rd of December. So that gives us the capacity to have come beginning of December to have quite a number of people in the field, including those from both Fonterra and Environs Holdings. The last item on the bottom of page 27 there is just an update. We have a memorandum of understanding now that's been signed with the Ministry of Social Development. Ministry of Social Development have assigned a staff member to be looking at jobs for nature overall and be interfacing at the coalface with those who require jobs, and be interfacing with organisations such as one of the tari from Ngā Manga Whakahi and also from Turiahau, looking at who are out there who need jobs and what their capabilities are, and then bringing them back through the Matakura to connect in with potential employers that may be working in different spaces. In addition to that, that memorandum may take us into an area where we might end up coming up with a specific KMR scheme. So that's just something that's on the books that we're talking about with MSD at the moment. So on to the last page on page 28 there. If you recall, there were sort of a number of science projects that we had on last year's work program, and some of it have transferred into this year's work program. A couple of those we've already mentioned in terms of the wetlands and eroding lands features. Tepayaka is another one, which is nearing its completion as well. But the South Kaipara Streams project has now been completed or has reached a milestone, which gives us some information that can enable us to be informed as to where the most potentially erodible areas are in the South Kaipara, and definitely within the Ngā Manga Whakahi rohe. And that is providing us with some really interesting science. So we would like to bring that report to the Joint Committee at your December meeting, and I'm sure that you will find the outcomes of that very interesting in terms of where the hotspots are, what the kind of geomorphological features are, the hydrological implications are around an erosion, particularly in the recent flooding activity and all of the other things that have happened in the South Kaipara. It's a very timely report that will come back to you. So the supplier accreditation, the next item on the agenda, we are already well into a process of accrediting both nurseries and fencing contractors and other planting contractors, etc. We've had over 30 organisations register, and we're still having a trickle of organisations coming in. And we've got a team actually looking at those now. Part of that money that I was requesting for the nursery strategy team was that they can actually now go out onto the nurseries and work through them with their processes, look at what's happening, and work through the process of accreditation. So that's well advanced. I'm optimistic that we can complete that process before Christmas, although there may well be one or two suppliers that we will need to address afterwards, but it will at least give us a number of accredited suppliers that we can publish on our website, that landowners who are involved in either the Whenua Whānau scheme or the landowner grant scheme will be able to draw on these suppliers. The next item there is the dedication of the Matakura, and we're looking at December the 3rd for that. Hopefully, those of us living in Tāmaki Makaurau will be out of lockdown at that stage, and we'll be able to go forward for that. Unfortunately, I gave the not quite right information there, that what we'll do is have the dedication of the Matakura on the 3rd, but in discussions with Justine, it looks as though we will have a pōwhiri for all staff once they are all on board in January. So that will be a much more formal activity later on rather than on the 3rd. We've also postponed the Moana field trip, which I think we were all looking forward to actually get out there and seeing what it looks like from being on the Moana. We wanted something before Christmas, but we're not going to be able to do that. So that's being postponed into the new Gregorian year as well. Annual report. You've all seen the annual report and approved it, and it's being posted on the website. We've got quite a significant mailing list to receive soft copies, and we've got 200 hard copies that are in process of being printed. So as soon as they are available, we will get them out to all of you, a copy each, and there may be some specific people that you think would benefit from a hard copy. We've already identified a number of people, such as MPs within the rohi, who could receive a hard copy, copies of that go to each of the uri authorities, etc. And lastly, there are 2 cars that have been purchased for use by the Matakura, and I've put this on there that we will be putting a decal, the Matakura brand on the side of it. So I put this on the agenda just in case you see a Matakura car driving down the road and say, well, I didn't know that. So it's part of No Surprises that you may well see these vehicles out. And the other vehicle that you'll see driving around will be a silver Camry, driven by one William Wright, which formerly had a IKHMG banner on it. It will now have a branded with the Matakura and also an Environs Holdings brand. So there'll be three cars of the Matakura brand driving around the rohi. So happy to answer, Mr. Chair, any questions on any of these matters.
Kia ora, Willie, you got your hand up?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, sorry, Tommy. Ask questions of Alan. I just want to just fill in 1 or 2 blanks of Alan's report.
Okay.
Or I can do that now.
Any questions from the members?
Got it, Tommy. To you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora. Kia ora, Alan. Thank you for that. The 2, the meetings that you had for the landowners, were they well attended? Even the one on Zoom, Just wondered how many people turned up to those 2 particular.
The exact numbers, Sandra, do you have those?
26 among the kahia. I'm not too sure of the webinar one.
How many was on the web? There were quite a few. There was actually quite a number in a group that actually attended the webinar one, and there were others as well. But do we have how many portals we have?
So we had 21 cameras on us with one group from Cody Park.
And there were quite a number of people in that Cody Park one that I saw. So 21 cameras. So probably around 30, 35 people perhaps at the second one. So they're not huge attendance, but certainly given the time frame, and we only were able to get the email out to them or the letter out to them 4 days in advance of the first one because of all sorts of issues around, finding venues and the restrictions and all the various other bits and pieces on it.
Right, thanks, Alan. And the South Catchment one, do you think we'll be having that before Christmas?
I doubt it, to be honest, because of the COVID situation. But it's a moving feast. The other question is do we want to have that prior to Christmas in December when everybody else is doing all sorts of other things? But that's a decision which I'll leave to Justine and the Matakura staff to come back to you on.
And is it possible, as a JC member to sit in on one of those, just, in the background, not to...
Of course.
Of course. Just to hear their, comments and any concerns, that sort of thing, so we can support, we know what they're thinking about and can support in some way.
Well, I think you all received a copy of the notice that went to landowners and essentially...
No, I didn't. Sorry, Alan, I didn't. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, you should have done. Anyway, essentially, no, of course, JC members are more than welcome. And, the more that you can be part of it, the better, actually, I think.
Right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you. Shiri.
Kia ora, Alan. Alan, I heard you talking about the blessing for the Matakura in December. I heard that the staff one is going to be moved to January. Is the morning blessing still going to continue?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. The morning blessing is still continuing with the Matakura, subject, of course, to COVID rules. So that limits the number of people that we might have there. But be interested to see from the chart that you were holding up before, Cherie, what that might look like. But definitely, it's definitely a morning blessing at that time. So I would imagine that in the next 2 or 3 days, later this week, already next week, we'll be sending out a run sheet of what that looks like, who's involved, etc. Yeah.
Should the borders still be up, Alan, could we please also have it so that there's a setup of a Zoom?
Kia ora. Yep.
Thank you.
I would definitely have to say you can certainly watch us eating breakfast, but I'm not into the Zooming of the formal kawairunga dedication of the premises. Someone else can have that glory, and we'll reserve it for those that want to get up at 5:30 and stand next to the Wharapo Kaumātua as they lead that. But there will be no live streaming of that at all.
Thank you.
And maybe by the time we sit down and the steak, eggs, onions, chips are laid out for breakfast, you can watch me deal to that.
Kia ora, kei a koutou.
About here, tikanga, Mr. Chairman, the steak, eggs, onions and chips. I'm not quite certain that's exactly what the menu is about.
Oh, sorry. I must have my context a bit wrong here. No, we're going to follow the process by asking Tepayaka to lead the proceeding to dedicate the premises. Our plans were always to try and align that with the welcome to the post-Arctic. This will be the third date, and I think we've got the balance right, apart from maybe live streaming that formal part. But certainly, once Wharapo have finished completing their formal proceeding and posted it up as far and wide as you like. But I'm not too comfortable with live streaming that first section.
Kia ora.
Okay.
I actually wasn't talking about live streaming. I was talking about us as KMR members who can't come across the borders.
Well, I'm talking about live streaming because of the context of our discussion, and certainly you'll get a link as KMR members will try and make sure that that's included in the invitation and party out.
Kia ora.
No further questions. Just pass it back to William.
Yeah, Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Just to add just a few more details. As Alan indicated, it's just on the 3rd of December, it's just a dedication in the morning, 5:30 and things like that. And there's a little bit of a kai after that. But the formal porphyry we're looking at, we do want to hold that on the marae. We'd like to actually make sure that both Northland or north part of the harbour and the southern part can be part of that porphyry. We also are looking at having that boat trip at that time as well. So, and of course, part of an induction package for all staff members and others on the Maori protocols, Kaipara Uri's protocols and the like. To date, we have 53 names, including, I think, 11 members from Auckland Council, and it is our hope that there will be a border relaxed, so you can come along to it. Of course, you're all aware we can only have 50 people max at this dedication. The last thing I'd just like to add is the Mātauranga Māori strategy has just begun. I've just started that process with Environs Holdings, who are at the moment talking with the other hapu around the catchment. And so fairly soon we're going to start getting into the real details of the strategy. And Patricia Clark from Environs Holdings Limited will be leading that. I just wanted to bring members up to date because this has been something that we've been waiting to get our hands into and start developing the strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to touch base on those matters.
Any further comments? Thank you, Alan, for the presentation, and look forward to the completion of the implementation for the 3rd of December, and of course the updates around the strategies and project or the programs that are aligned to specific projects as it's being reported. I'll give you a couple of points, my reflections on the landowner meeting on Thursday. And I'm not being disrespectful here, but I think if you invite landowners, it is pretty important to hear from landowners. So in other words, if the 26 people there are landowners, you want to hear what they've got to say. I think if there is any discussion about personal views of staff or anyone else to do with the program, that can happen in another time. I think there's a level of reluctance, certainly I know at this end of the Mangakahia River catchment, for people to engage in a whole range of activities. And what I did hear there was a sort of indication, I think, real positive one, would have moved from Jeff Crawford around what he saw as an angle or an approach by the Kaipara Moana remedial program that didn't take into account the value that reticulated stock water can have on the whole scheme of remediation. So in other words, you go to the effort of section, isolating a section of the riparian margin, maximum 20 metres, fence it, plant it out, then in drought hits. What happens to those farms that haven't got a structured reticulation scheme to provide drinking water through, for their livestock? First option, drop the wires on the riparian margin and let the animals have access to those waterways, which made perfect sense. And I think that's the level of input, direction, dialogue. And those that know Mr. Jeff Crawford will agree that he's probably got a fairly substantial level of investment in land ownership. If those of you that know Ben Smith, the profile that Ben Smith started, Jeff Crawford has just taken it to another level, and he's talking about more property. It's also, I think his comments were more, not so much the dairy platform, but more of the sheep and beef rolling sort of areas. And when you think about the Matakura, there's the land survey block, the Pamu holdings, Titopi, and come further to the very northern end inside the Far North District Council area is the property that belongs to the Spence Family Trust, Matakura, huge, looking about 4,500 cows, I think, on a half dozen dairy platform. And it all sort of feeds into the Matakura down into Wairua. So yeah, but overall, I think it was a tremendous effort to see the numbers turn out there. Timing was critical. I know our neighbours at home here were flat out trying to get silage in, and people might recall that Friday hammered down rain up here. It's raining this morning, not so this morning. It's turned out a pretty good day for farmers are busy people, as you know. And there's no further comments from one and all. Thank you very much for your time today, and hope you found it useful. And Alan, do you have any final points you want to raise?
No, just very briefly, Mr. Chair, this will be my last meeting in this role with you, and I just want to thank you all so much for enabling me to participate in this way for the last few months. It's been a wonderful time for me, and just wish you all the best, and I'm sure that Justine will take the process to a new height, and we've taken it so far, and it's great to be able to hand over the baton. So I'd just like to thank you all very much formally, and wish you all of the very, very best. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Alan. Well, I guess before we close the meeting, it's pretty important to acknowledge the contribution made to the progress, the early step, the first steps of not only the Kaipara Moana Remediation Joint Committee, but certainly the advent and arrival of Kaipara Matakura into the space, where we're heading, what it's about, areas that are going to represent fairly significant contribution to the aspirations that were put together certainly in the last 7 years, back to the framework agreement in 2014, Woodham. And really want to acknowledge your contribution, your skill set, and been a pleasure and a privilege to work alongside you. And like I say, keep in touch and look forward to continuing the association there. Ella? Ora mihi pai ora ki a koe. Ora ki maru tō tātai whakaheke pai rāpiti ki e ngā wehenga o tō o tuki. Tauru te mauri o rātou raki ki ngā koe. So ladies and gentlemen, if there are no further comments, I want to bring our meeting to a close and can officially ask that we stop the live stream recording, I guess. I think that's how you